until you wake up, until you know who you are, until you're other than that which identifies with the thoughts and the emotions. See, because when you identify with the thoughts and the emotions, you're literally being your conditioning. And when you're being your conditioning, then that conditioning is run by a pattern of avoiding painful, threatening things and seeking pleasurable, comfortable things. That's the way it's running all the time, right? And so that determines you. That's determining you, which means that you will be attracted to pleasurable taste experiences, regardless of whether it's nutritious. And because the program has you desire pleasurable experiences, and you're drawn to that, you may overeat, and you may eat for taste instead of nutrition. And because the program is running to avoid discomfort and anything that's threatening, right? That you avoid people, you avoid situations, right? You avoid anything that's uncomfortable. Well, one of the problems is, in order to keep this body in shape, in order to do the right thing as far as what it needs is concerned, you're going to have to be uncomfortable, because that's what it's going to take. Same thing with meditation. You're going to have to be uncomfortable to practice meditation in the beginning. Well, that's opposite of what the program is. So the program's going to be saying, oh no, this is wrong. This is uncomfortable. We don't want to do this, you see. Until you wake up, you can't act in your own best interest. This is very important. You have to really experience the degree of frustration that's available to you when you realize how helpless you are. How helpless you are in terms of your own behavior. Not only in terms of the way you behave in your relationships to people, but the way you behave in relationship to your own body. The way you behave in relationship to your life, So until you wake up, you can't act in your own best interest. That means that the mind is controlling what's going on, and it will readily trade off your physical well-being and physical health, right, for the success of the program. It'll readily trade that off. That's why when you look around at people, you can see how unhealthy human beings are. So first you have to be free from the tyranny of your mind. You have to be free from the mind that's operating you in a way that's inconsistent with your best interest and your well-being. You have to be free from that tyranny. And you can't be free from that tyranny until you wake up, because until you wake up, you think you are the mind. You think you are the thinker, right? Which is to think you are the mind. To think you are the thinker is to think you are the mind. And so you're identified with it in such a way, and you don't question what it's telling you to do or not do, and so you unwittingly follow it. This is what Richard Davidson meant when he said, we are unwittingly shaping the way our brain, the data that we have in our brain and our mind. We're unwittingly, because of the neuroplasticity, right? Which means that the brain is always learning about what's true and what's real and how to function. It's always learning about that. Well, where's it getting its information from? It's getting its information from a crazy person, because the brain is taking in data based on the way you experience yourself in your life. So if the way you experience yourself in your life is that you're depressed, anxious, miserable, fearful, avoiding a lot of things, overdoing some things and so forth, right? The brain is not awake. It has to accept the data you give it. So, and the data you give it is the experience you're having. So if you continue to be nuts, you keep feeding that information into the system, right? Now you have a crazy brain. You have a crazy brain. So you have a crazy brain. So when that brain gets stimulated, when it gets triggered in terms of your experience in some kind of threat, right? Given the way it's been educated about reality, it'll produce angry, irrational, acting out behavior. That's what it'll produce, because as far as that system is concerned, that's what's called for. You know what I mean? That's what's called for. If you feel threatened and the way you've learned to deal with threat is to attack, the brain will gear your body up and have you attack. Even if that means killing somebody, even if that means hurting somebody physically, even if that means being mean and nasty and hurting somebody emotionally, you know. You will do that automatically. You have no say-so about it. This is the helplessness that is important to realize, to feel. How helpless you are in relationship to the nervous system and the brain that's operating this physical body and causing your behavior. How helpless you are in regard to that.
And that comes all from conditioning from Earth, I guess?
Yeah, well, not just conditioning, but the nature of the conditioning, right, is it's conditioning that is providing information to a program to survive, for survival. That's the problem. It's not just conditioning, but the conditioning is providing data for a program that's operating for survival. And not only is that the case for you as an individual, that's the case for the society you're in, isn't it? Isn't the American society attempting to survive in relationship to the rest of the world? And aren't the other countries attempting to survive in relationship to this country and so forth? So that's the collective reality you're in. That's the thing that makes it so difficult to do this work, is because, you know, you learn about this possibility that's different from the way it is generally speaking, but you still have to live in the world that is ignorant. You still have to live in the world that's functioning primarily with a program for survival. And like my Zen teacher says, you know, an awake person has a lot of sorrow about that in relationship to humanity. An awake person understands the way you relate to that reality as it manifests in other people is with kindness and compassion. With kindness and compassion. But that doesn't mean that you don't take care of business. That doesn't mean you don't take care of yourself. You may have to protect yourself physically from a person who is lost in the sauce. You may have to do that. But even while you're doing that, there's kindness and compassion, because you know that person is innocent. There's a program running their behavior that's causing them to do what they're doing. And they don't know that. They're identified with that. They think that program is truthful. They think that program is realistic. So then they have to justify what they're doing, right? So they come up with explanations, you know, that justify their behavior, you know. Well, self-control, see, self-control and self-improvement are the same thing in a sense. And what I mean by that is there's nothing wrong with doing everything you can do to be a decent human being. There's nothing wrong with doing everything you can do to improve your personality, you know what I mean? To have a personality that's as functional as possible, right? There's nothing wrong with any of that. In fact, not only is there nothing wrong with any of that, but when you're awake, the personality starts to improve or starts to change in a direction of being more functional and capable of experiencing a quality of life that's being given by the awake state. So, improving the personality and controlling your out-of-control behaviors, whether we're talking about addiction or anger or whatever the case may be, nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But when you wake up, instead of the control being a function of your being afraid you'll get arrested and go to prison, instead of that, the control is a function of you're awake and you have a moral compass. Now you behave the way you do because you see the truth, not because you're afraid of getting arrested. It's like that. It's a natural morality. It's a natural morality. You treat people and you treat animals and you treat nature. You treat everything with respect. And I'll say this, don't worry about whether you get it or not. You treat everything with respect because you are everything. Don't forget, the bottom line is consciousness is all there is. So when you're awake, what you used to think was out there is now not out there, it's all you. Everything is you. And so you're relating to everything with kindness, compassion, and love. You're relating to everything and everybody with kindness, compassion, and love. Even people who are being totally crazy and destructive. Because they're innocent, you know. Putin is innocent. A lot of people wouldn't like to hear that, you know what I mean? Because they're coming from a survival perception, right? What's that?
He's running off his program.
Just like all the rest of us. So he's no different than all the rest of us, you know? He's running off his programming. And his program was such, I mean, if you consider his conditioning, he was a part of the KGB. You know what I mean? If you look at that personality, right? That personality became an isolated, highly defensive, highly aggressive person, right? Highly controlled, right? And so, you know, when somebody like that gets into a position of power, whether it's Putin or Donald Trump, there's going to be hell to pay. Hell to pay, because because when somebody is in that condition, part of it is that they become selfish, self-centered, right? Greedy, right? Totally narcissistic, right? Seeing everybody as either you're under your domination and you're afraid to be dominated by anybody else. You know, this is the, you know, when you look at these caricatures, you're seeing classic models of a survival operation, aren't you? Doesn't matter how many people have to die, right, for this person to have their will carried out in the world. That's absolute insanity. And then how do we react to that? You know, we turn that person into a monster, right? Which is our, you know, that's our survival programming reacting to him. You see how the whole thing is a very dangerous situation? We're egocentric. In other words, we believe we're right, you know, us and them. It's an us and them situation. As long as it's an us and them situation, it's always going to have the potential of being very destructive.